Welcome to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers Podcast. Each episode will bring you conversations from business leaders and up-and-coming stars in the commercial real estate industry in Canada. Our guests will share their unique career journeys, passions, and advice on what it takes to be successful in this industry. This podcast is brought to you by Highview Partners, connecting people who perform in Canadian real estate.
Welcome to the Real Estate Careers Podcast. I'm Richard Costello, and today I'm joined by Tiffany Duzita, Vice President of Acquisitions and Development at RCG Group. So in my opinion, Tiffany has one of the more unique career journeys in the industry, from the publicly traded Smart Centres REIT to local private developer Townline. Tiffany spent 18 months with the Tsawwassen First Nation and close to 10 years in social purpose housing with the Community Land Trust, where she started as one of the first employees and went on to become executive director, helping it grow into one of BC's leading non-profit housing developers. In February this year, 2025, Tiffany joined RCG Group in Richmond and is responsible for acquisitions and development across Western Canada and the US. So many topics for us to potentially cover, so I'll do my best to keep us on track. But Tiffany, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Richard, for having me today.
All right, so we'll start at the beginning. Tiff, what first drew you to real estate, and was there a moment or some influence from somebody that sparked that early on?
Yeah, I think I've always been interested in the built form, even as a kid, and just very curious about how things got built or why they were built the way they were. I even think back to my childhood, and this is probably something I realized early on in life with a link, is that, I loved playing Lego, and my brother and I would play Lego, and he would be building cars and starships, and I would be, or spaceships, and I would be building homes or little communities and doing my own imaginative and interactive play. And, as you can probably see, that kind of led, kind of the key milestone of where I was satisfying that curiosity was really in my undergraduate degree at UBC, where I gravitated to taking classes in urban geography. And that exposed me to other peers that had like-minded curiosity in real estate. And it was a good friend of mine who actually went on to BCIT. She was a year ahead of me, as Cheryl Peters, who's now one of the directors with BC Housing. And she introduced me to a program at BCIT called the Architectural and Building Technology Program. And so I gravitated to that, and it was really that program that introduced me to the foundation of real estate development, because in the second year you had the opportunity to focus in different disciplines. And at that time, I decided to focus in the economics and the construction operations side. And that really introduced me to the financial aspect and the project management of how to lead a project from beginning to end, which then started to fill in those gaps of my curiosity of, like, how did that get built and why did it get built there, or why did they build it that way? And also the understanding of how on the financial side that drives your decision making as well, which was very interesting and obviously sparked my interest in the numbers component in real estate development, which is one of my favorite things about the sector.
Okay. And as I mentioned in the intro, you've worked across a wide range of organizations and project types, as we'll get onto here. In the early days, so like Smart Centres and Townline. So how did those experiences shape your perspective on what makes a successful development, both from like a business and community point of view?
Yeah, I think it was, there's lessons to be learned of things that you realize that, were positives and negatives that could impact both the success of a business and a development. And I think through both of those organizations, I definitely learned that success from a business perspective does need strong and aligned leadership. and clear accountability and responsibility, especially as organizations grows, having that clarity of roles and in what everybody's part is in a development. Strong mentorship as well. That's not always available in every organization, and I've been fortunate to have that in my career, to have that strong mentorship within the organizations that I worked with. And also, one of the things that I also learned was clear company planning from a business perspective too, both in the short and the long term. And when you didn't have that, chaos can happen. You can have silos start to develop within organizations, and that makes it more challenging. Not only, if I think back as myself working in an organization, but impactful on everybody there. And it makes things more difficult to achieve, which then translates also to difficulties into a project. Creates a little bit of that, what you call like the company chaos a little bit. But on the success of a development, and this really was ingrained when I first started at Smart Centers, we were building big box shopping centers and going into greenfield neighborhoods, and a joint venture partnership with Walmart. And so a lot of community advocates that were coming out and opposing developments. So it was a part of like the success of a development was being able to maybe take a step back and involve the community in understanding the development. And this even translated into my years at Townline and getting into the multifamily and mixed use developments, and especially larger multi-building developments. Realizing that what you're building today is truly impacting a neighborhood and will change it. And there is some change management skills that need to be developed to go along with your project management skills. And recognizing that a development is not necessarily going to appease everyone, but it's also important to understand that community and recognize what you're building there is going to leave a lasting impression. Because you might just build it, sell it, and walk away. But the community members, of whether they live there or work there or own their businesses there, will be impacted directly by what you're building. And so being able to involve them and hopefully make some decisions that can build a successful development, even though you might not realize those successes until years later.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And working for a large public company like Smart Centers and a privately held firm like Townline, I can imagine that there's quite big differences in terms of like culture, decision making, or even like the pace of development. I don't know, did you find that to be the case?
Yeah, I think when I started with Smart Centers, it hadn't yet become the big publicly traded company it is today. I was there at the tail end as it was transitioning out into Callaway REIT at the time, and then into what is now referred to as Smart Centers REIT. But we were a satellite office in charge of Western Canada, so we were still a small team, but a part of a very large organization with what I mentioned earlier, a JV partner being Walmart. And so there was exposure, to different reporting styles, different objectives, and how you had to present things, because the decision making for development wasn't solely within the company. It involved, everything from how do you greenlight something at the satellite office level, with your vice president, and how do you get up to then the company's executive leadership team to greenlight that, and then onto the JV partnership as well. And being able to take a project through that process and the different levels of leadership and understanding how they are actually going to view a project, to allow you to move forward. And everybody looks at it a bit differently, right? Going from the micro level of the development all the way up to the macro level. So it definitely created some core skills that when I actually went to Townline, Townline had a few JV partners as well, and those skill sets were very transferable over there. But when I got to Townline, it did feel a little bit of a natural transition because I was going back to that same feeling of Smart Centers being that satellite office and being a small team, and Townline was quite small and in a growth phase as well at that time. Except, you had the owner of the company that was a couple of offices down from you, right? Where you could open the door and you could sit down. So the decision makers were all within the organization. And so being able to be exposed to that internal leadership, where decisions could be made a lot more quickly for the development. So you didn't have the same kind of the bureaucratic levels and the hierarchies within an organization and external partners.
Right, okay. So for any aspiring development managers that might be listening, can you recall any career advice or insight that you would share to set someone up on the right path?
Yeah, being reflective on my own career, I think if even giving advice to my younger self as well, is that it's very important to surround yourself with good leaders and peers. Whether if you can't find that within your company, seek those outside your company. They should really be your champions and your mentors to listen and guide you. Not necessarily the people that you want sitting there telling you what you should do. And this is sometimes where I find that where your close friends and your family are often emotional in their decision making and they want to kind of tell what's best for you. And you really need to seek that expertise that can be partial to walk you through, ask you questions, and where you can come to your own realizations of what you might need, or even having a sounding board of somebody with that expertise in the same sector, so that you can navigate difficult decisions or challenges, whether that might be something of like just the mechanics of a real estate development, or you're dealing with personal challenges within the organization as well, because we work with people every day, and sometimes I find some of the largest challenges are navigating those relationships with people, whether within your organization or outside. So, and also I think one of the biggest learning curves that I had would be being open into like the giving and the receiving of feedback as well. So be open to receiving feedback, but also giving feedback. We all learn in different styles, and sometimes people don't know. So if you kind of give feedback that will help you succeed in life, that can also be helpful. So being able to find your voice in a very professional manner and respectful manner, to basically move yourself forward in an open-minded approach. Yeah, don't be closed, like, it's just my way.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Well, I want to turn to what became a defining chapter in your career, your move to Community Land Trust in 2015. So for those who may not know, can you perhaps explain, first of all, what the Community Land Trust is and how it differs from a traditional developer?
Yeah, Community Land Trust is a nonprofit social purpose real estate developer that creates permanently affordable housing solutions with a focus on cooperative housing. That focus is driven because it's owned and was established by the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC in 2015, really as the driver of growth of non-market and cooperative housing in British Columbia. It's interesting because a lot of people do ask about, like, what's the difference of a nonprofit real estate developer versus a private sector developer, and the true mechanics of real estate development are very similar. You've got to find a parcel of land, you've got to go through the entitlement process with the local government, you have to find funding to build it, you've got to manage the consultants, design, permitting, construction, and then fill and operate the building. So those mechanics are very similar. What's different is the multi-layers on how you might get there with limited resources. So you're not drawing profit from the buildings either. So that would be one key thing. So you're collecting fees, just like through a development process to cover your overhead. There are also fees in the operations of it for the property and asset management. But when it comes time, when you're establishing those revenue targets for the building once it's in operations, you're really trying to establish that long-term lens to affordability. So instead of maximizing what you can get on the revenue side, you're looking at finding the balance of your revenue to cover your annual operating cost, your debt servicing, your capital reserves. And also some projects do have social purpose equity partners that have invested in them and have expected returns. So you're also balancing that. I mean, the biggest difference, though, is how you piece all of that together, because you're doing more with less. And by that is that, most of the affordable housing today, especially in BC, is taking advantage of provincial and federal funding programs, and also the investments of municipal land to build housing in their communities. But each one, the level of those governments comes with policy and their own bureaucratic layers. So your costs aren't any cheaper. And you might actually be asked to build to a higher design standard. So like in Vancouver, for example, to passive house, or being pushed into mass timber to hit, other government objectives with regards to the built form in different sectors within the province. And so you're balancing, 3 levels of government with policy, funding programs that you're accessing to help build the housing, but will restrict your revenue at the end of the day, which then that's how you pay your staff and your debt and your equity partners. And so that it's very complex and involves a strong team to basically navigate all of those different priorities from levels of government while still staying on mission and trying to get the housing built so people can move in.
You said it sounds complex. I thought that sounds quite easy, Tiffany.
Yeah, I'm even simplifying it, because
you're doing a good job of simplifying.
Yeah. Well, I sometimes I read as some of the projects that I started on early on, or just starting construction or completing, and there's, sometimes people can be critical to the timing of getting these homes to market. And, it's no different than the private sector. So like in Vancouver, it can take 6 to 7 years. It's no different for the nonprofit sector. We're going through those same challenges and the same hurdles, and probably even more because we don't have the access to the working capital that might be needed, or we're required, or I shouldn't say we, but when I was with the Community Land Trust, you're actually required to go after those senior levels of government funding if you're utilizing a municipal land investment. So you're subject to the timing of those funding programs that ebb and flow depending on the government of the day, the budget of the year, and the allocation of those funds with many nonprofits that are competing either for provincial funds or federal funds.
As you say, doing more with less, and you were one of the first employees and eventually became executive director. So what was it like building the organization from the ground up?
Yeah, when you asked, I saw this question, I said 3 things came to mind: exciting, challenging, and rewarding. In 2015, when I first started there, I didn't ever dream that it would become what it did, and that, when I left earlier this year, that, I'd be leaving a company of, I think, almost 40 employees and a portfolio that had reached around $1.3 billion. It never dawned on me when I went over there. You kind of thought, you do a few projects here and there, and that things aligned obviously as well with government investment and where we needed to go with affordable housing, and really being able to hone my skills from the private sector and really capitalize on those opportunities, both for new development and also for acquisitions. But it was a steep learning curve, being open to learning and from mistakes as well, And, if I can also think of one defining moment of a huge learning curve, was in 2021 when we decided to internalize the property management division. And that was a whole world open to me with a new business model that we were bringing into the company, a new skill set, and how to actually build a department and integrate that into the organization as well. But all of that is rewarding when you kind of reflect on it and the things that you kind of learn and the skill sets that are developed through those opportunities.
Yeah. And when you reflect, when you look back on your time there, what would you say you're most proud of?
I think there's two things, and I'm most proud of the team that got built there, and being part of that and developing a senior leadership within the organization and seeing them excel, but also exposing them to kind of the second rewarding thing for myself, and being able to share that with them. And it's getting them out into the field, especially when the housing was built or we were able to acquire and save homes. And for everybody in the organization to see the impact that they're having by getting them out to those developments and meeting the co-op members or the other residents that are living in these homes, and realizing that they're changing lives.
And working in the non-profit housing sector, I imagine it calls for quite a different toolkit. So what skills or leadership qualities do you think were most critical to succeeding in that space?
Yeah, I kind of describe this one as being able to have the appearance of calm in the face of a hurricane. We talked earlier about the complexity of the developments and the competing interests with levels of government and dealing with the complexities of funding programs and the ebb and flow of opportunity, whether it's through RFPs for a land opportunity or a funding call. And it can be chaotic, because it's almost like you're pitted against your peers and the other nonprofit organizations in a competitive process, and at the same time you're trying to drive your mission and the importance of the housing, and knowing that that getting the housing built because of such a great need for it, and as you build a team, not even as if you feel that you're anxious and all of that, to have that sense of calm so that you can sit back and you can listen first, to really better understand the challenges, whether that be the challenges your team might be having from a staffing perspective or even a personal burnout perspective. Listening to your partners, all three levels of government, or even your equity partners that could be involved. So I kind of put it as that there's the people, the project, and the partners aspect, and listening to everything and dissecting that and putting that forward in an objective-based approach to keep moving things forward. So that it does hone your skill sets a little bit, because there's a lot of components of the nonprofit development that are not within your control. Because there's so many players involved in different policies that you're trying to achieve, with everybody's investment into those projects. So yeah.
And getting into the details a little bit, like how did you approach balancing the organization's social mission with the financial realities of development, just to ensure that these projects were viable?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's like two aspects to that, because there's acquisitions, where we were purchasing existing housing, and then there's also the new developments, and oftentimes there's a different approach to that. And the acquisitions, I'll start with that one first, and that was where there's the biggest clash with regards to balancing mission with the financial realities, because you're often faced with hundreds of homes being sold to the private sector and being lost, homes that are filled with probably our most vulnerable residents, seniors and very low income, and sometimes mission would override the financials of a project, but relying on the strength of yourself and your team, that if you can succeed in the acquisition, that you will be able to navigate those financial challenges moving forward, and those other partners that you'll bring to the table, whether it be working with municipalities, funders with different lending programs. And just kind of trusting the process, that you'll find solutions. But the mission was the driving force for an acquisition. For new development, I would say it's very similar to the private sector, but going back to, that you're dealing with the multi-layers of government. And so not only are you trying to balance your own mission, but you're also trying to balance the objectives or missions of all three levels of government that might define affordability three different ways. So, but at the end of the day, the job is to pull everybody's objectives together and combine that into a common mission, so that you can keep moving it forward. And it's never in a linear line. It's always going to zig and zag along the way, but just to keep making sure that you're driving that forward and keeping the big picture in front of you, which is really delivering the housing at the end of the day, and the nonprofit model, which will deliver. Maybe not. People could be criticized that it doesn't deliver a really deep level of affordability day one, but it's a proven model to deliver that affordability long range.
Are you looking for a specialized recruiting partner to connect you with the people who perform in commercial real estate? At Highview, we partner with some of Canada's leading real estate companies. From national landlords, institutional investors, REITs and service providers, to local developers, third parties, and private family businesses. We are passionate about the Canadian real estate industry and enjoy discussing what's happening in the market. We also provide insight and advice on hiring trends, compensation benchmarking, career roadmaps, networking opportunities, and much more. Visit us at highviewpartners.ca or contact us directly to discover how we can connect you to people who perform.
After nearly a decade there, you made the move back to the private sector with RCG Group. So, first of all, what inspired that transition, and what appealed to you about RCG and the opportunity there?
Yeah, I was hitting a point in my career and also my personal life as well, and where I wanted to focus my energies next, in what I call my third chapter. It took a lot of time to reflect on what I wanted to do, and not just what I wanted to do, what actually made me happy, and where I wanted to focus my next kind of years in my career, and really what I enjoy about the real estate sector is the art of the deal. I love finding the opportunity, and working. I love the financing and the numbers aspect, but I also enjoyed, you can go back to even my days at Town Line, and then the early days at Community Land Trust. I really enjoyed those initial days of an organization heading on a growth agenda, and what does that mean, and building those internal toolkits and capacity, and setting those goals and objectives, and being able to drive those forward for success. And so, when the opportunity came up with RCG, it aligned with me with things that I was looking for. They have a growth plan. It's a small organization, again, with some very big growth plans, and being able to bring my knowledge and my experience into an organization, into a role where I could focus on the things that I enjoy most, but an organization that's small enough that you can add that capacity and experience into an open environment where people are receptive to it and are welcome to have that experience in different lens to drive the organization's goals. And then it's interesting because I remember in the interviewing process and even in the job description, it mentioned EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system. And it's the first time I had heard about it. And of course, I went right to Google to learn about it and learned about with Gino Wickman and the book Traction. And I started reading about it and I was like, this makes such logical sense to drive successful businesses. Why doesn't everybody do it? And that really resonated with me and with Harold and the company, just embodying that system to help drive them for success, or what we refer to as traction.
Yeah, I was hoping you might bring that up. Well, can you tell us a bit more about RCG Group for anyone that's unfamiliar, maybe its history, Harold Goodwin, his leadership, and what defines the company culture now you've been there for a little while?
So RCG is a full-service commercial and industrial real estate company that includes property management, development, acquisitions, asset management, and it's led by Harold Goodwin and a team of experts, in their individual fields. But its origins go back to the days of Harold's father, Harvey. So back in the early 1960s, and building, his first property on Cornet Road, and eventually I think most of the assets and growth was actually in the Richmond area. Okay. And then, under Harold's leadership, kind of grew RCG into the Calgary, Rocky View County area in Alberta, and also down into the United States. So currently the company is sitting at 28 properties with over 2.8 million square feet of industrial and neighborhood shopping centers.
And what about the culture? What have you learned? What defines the company culture?
Yeah, I remember coming in for my first interview, and when you walk into the office, you do feel that sense of culture with regards to a small organization, but also that family run, and when you go into the boardroom and the core values are up right on the wall, progressive, passionate, leading, accountable, caring, and ethical. And, everybody within the organization right away, I could see that they believed in those core values. And that was a testament to Harold and his leadership. I've been into organizations before where as much as a company puts forward, a business plan, its purpose and core values, maybe it's not rolled out in the best manner for company buy-in, but everybody here really truly believes in the work that they're doing, the core values of the company, and everybody feels valued as well. So it was just a good feeling coming in and walking through these doors. It felt like a great fit, and Harold himself, it even reminds me of my days at Townline. Rick Illich was very much like that, an open door policy, and you could sit down and just have, a real conversation. And also just the history as well. Like Harold talking back to his days with his father, and just a warm feeling in an organization, and being part of that versus very corporate or bureaucratic that you might find in larger organizations. And it was just a right fit for me as I was looking at what do I want in this next chapter of my career.
No, the office does have a nice warm feel to it, and I think the lunch or lounge area is kind of one of the more chilled spaces I've seen in an office environment. It's clear that Harold wants people to be comfortable and to have that space to relax in. It's really nice. Well, Tiff, your role combines acquisitions and development, which not everyone gets to do. So how do those two disciplines kind of inform each other in your day-to-day work?
I think they're very aligned, because in order to have a development project, you need to acquire it. So RCG is not just developing our own buildings, but we're also buying existing income-producing assets. So, my experience even at Community Land Trust and buying and going through that process and analysis of the feasibility of income-producing assets was obviously translatable coming in here, but also being able to manage large development projects from the ground up. So, the two skill sets do go hand in hand. In larger organizations, it's, often separated into two different departments. But this is what appealed me to the role, is it combined my kind of two passions within the industry into one role, while still being able to leverage my operational and organizational development experience into a growing organization. And you get a touch point with all the other departments, right? You're working quite closely with the finance department and real estate services, whether that be, with the leasing team or the property management team as well. So it is, I often refer to the development side as kind of, if I can use the football analogy, it's like you're the quarterback a little bit on the field. So you're running the play, but you need to have everybody on side and understanding that play in order to execute. So I kind of like that process and involving everybody within the organization in order to deliver a successful development, whether you're purchasing something or building something.
And you mentioned that you have property in the Lower Mainland, kind of the Calgary area, and also the US, particularly Las Vegas. So it might seem obvious, but what's the strategic thinking for RCG behind those markets?
Yeah, well, the expansion into Alberta was kind of long before I started, but it's if my experience now in going out into Calgary and especially in today's marketplace. So we've got 328,000 square feet that's currently under construction in Rocky View County, which is just north of Calgary. The Alberta market is a growing market. It's cheaper to buy land there. It's cheaper to operate there, which obviously makes sense as we see a transition of a lot of larger distribution centers centralizing their operations in Alberta, and maybe holding smaller warehouses or distribution centers here in BC. So that market has been booming. It probably hit a peak, with supply in that market in 2024, and it slowly is absorbing. And as we move into 2025, and then as our building kind of completes in 2026, it was definitely a strategic decision to start our current building in the spring of this year, so that when we're complete in 2026, that most of the existing product that had been built will be absorbed, and then we know that there is still demand in that marketplace. We had a little bit of a hiccup in the road earlier this year, as everybody did, with tariffs and uncertainty with our neighbors to the south. But it's amazing to see how people, as like you take a pause, you recalibrate, and we're really seeing a resurgence now of people starting to make decisions. So when I said pause, people were just making pauses on decisions. It didn't mean that demand was no longer there as businesses were pivoting and adjusting. It just meant, as in anything when you're dealt with and facing uncertainty, is that it may not be the best time to make a decision. And so now that things are settling out and businesses are navigating the challenges that they had faced early in the year, we're starting to see decision making happening. And this has really started to happen down in the Las Vegas market. I mean, Las Vegas is a hub, for warehouse and distribution, either coming from the ports in California and then as a distribution area into Western US. So we acquired a building in July of this year, just over 85,000 square feet, and it was 50% occupied at the time, and it's in the West Henderson area, which is just south of Las Vegas. And it's about expanding our geographic asset and portfolio in that area, because we just had one asset at the time, and we don't like isolated assets, so we're trying to build our asset base in the geographic locations and have economies of scale. And in the beginning, we didn't have much interest, and you start to get worried with the lease up of the building. But I would probably say in the last month that you're starting to see the larger guys, whether that are taking the 600,000 square feet plus, they're starting to make those decisions. And when the big guys start to make their decisions on deals in space, the ancillary users start to follow. And so now we have a pickup on interest in the remaining space in our building. And we're seeing a lot more opportunity for acquisitions in that area as well for expansion.
Yeah, no, that's great. And is the process similar to doing deals in Canada? What are the big differences? And I don't know, it kind of conjures up some interesting stories of doing deals in Las Vegas. Is there any things to share?
Well, not only of you kind of just feel a little bit of a rock star when you fly in to go and look at a property. But I would say the mechanics of analyzing a deal are very similar, because you're going to be doing that with your financials and your internal KPIs and how you would evaluate the metrics for a real estate opportunity. I would say that the biggest difference is like anything in the United States. It's bigger than Canada, right? So there's more opportunity, but even as you move forward and you secure a property and you're going through the due diligence and the closing process, but where I kind of saw the biggest difference was really when we reached the options with lending. The lending options in the United States are very grand compared to Canada, and a lot of them are insurance or pension funds versus more traditional banks that we utilize here in Canada. And so you might go and deal and have a relationship with a broker, and they might say, well, I can start with options of I've got 800 lenders in my roster that we could go to, right? And you're like, 800, right? But you'll start to kind of weed down in that process of defining which lenders might be most appropriate for the real estate acquisition that you're looking at, and you'll start to narrow it down, and then eventually kind of lock in with one. And the entitlement process for once you kind of waive conditions, I would say, is very different as well. I mean, in Canada, we're used to the closing process. Both the vendor and the purchaser's lawyer are going to run that process for you. And there, you're really dealing with the U.S. title process, the transfer of deed down there, and it's run through the First American Financial Corporation, right, through the title insurance, and your lawyers tend to be in the background a little bit as a CC on the emails. So a little bit different of running it through a large national organization for that entitlement for the transfer of deed and the closing process, versus having a little bit more control of that process through your lawyers. So that was a bit of a learning curve for myself, but exciting nonetheless.
And how did you celebrate your deal in Las Vegas? Is it as I'm imagining, or not?
But Vegas
not
style,
quite.
but in Richmond. So one of the things that I thoroughly enjoyed through my time at Community Land Trust was being able to celebrate key milestones or wins within an organization, and understanding that not everybody might comprehend a key milestone, but allowing everybody to be involved in that and the celebration, and also educate them as well on why we're celebrating. So we decided on the day when we closed, so when we officially got notification that the purchase had closed, we had a staff celebration with a little Vegas theme here in the office, which was great, and great to kind of bring everybody together.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Well, let's shift gears a little bit here. So away from kind of the deals and development into more of the personal side of things. So you live and work in Richmond, which is conveniently where RCG is based. What do you enjoy most about the community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm born and raised in Richmond, so it's dear to my heart. So I live in Steveston, and I think it's a great community to live in. I don't know, it seems to me like where I live is also kind of a little bit aligned with what I like in organizations. I like the small and surrounding myself with community, whether that, it's just I happen to land in Steveston and it has that sense of community, but I think that's at the core of who I am. And wherever I might want to live, whether that be now or in the future, is that it's the importance of having that strong community around me, built infrastructure, but also the people.
And outside of work, I know this about you. In fact, you're quite public about your love for pickleball. How did you get hooked? What do you enjoy about it?
Yeah, I got hooked like many people during the pandemic, trying to source activities. I'm a very active person. I love to be in the outdoors. And I stumbled across pickleball, and one day I said to my dad, I was like, I found the old tennis rackets in my garage. I think I'll get them restrung, and we should go out and hit the ball. And we went out to the tennis courts, and tennis wasn't as easy as we remembered. It was a lot of running around, and there was somebody over on the pickleball courts in Richmond at Hugh Boyd where I play. The tennis courts and the pickleball courts are side by side, and somebody yelled out my dad's name and said, Wayne, and it was a common connection, and it happened to be David Yan, who is on the board of the Richmond Pickleball Association.
Okay.
He's like, come over here. Let me introduce you to pickleball. He goes, I've got some other paddles here and some balls, and and then it was kind of like, well, this is fun, right? And then he started to explain to me about the association and organized play that they had on certain nights during the week. So I paid my $40 and became a member. And I came out to play, and met, once again, I think community at my core. The sense of community that pickleball brought me. I don't know in my, as being an adult and playing sports, I don't know of one activity where I could be like, I have an hour, I can just grab my paddle, I can go down to the courts, and there's always somebody there to play with, right? I don't have to find people to play with or join a team or anything. It's just, you can show up, you can play. And then I don't think there's a sport out there where you'll find yourself on a court playing with multi-generational, like everything down from a teenager to somebody that might be in their 70s or 80s, and everybody having fun. I've never experienced that before in a sport, and I think it's one of the draws that it brings people together with a common interest of being active and the love of the game.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I'm yet to. I've played a few times, as you know,
Yeah.
but I've never put my paddle, on the hook as a solo player and joined in. But kind of moved a little bit closer to Queen Elizabeth Park recently, so
Yeah.
I'm going to give that a try one time when the sun's back out.
Yeah. Well, especially if you go traveling. I mean, it's such an easy
Right.
thing to pack. You can put it in your carry-on,
that's true.
right?
Yeah.
I've even experienced even traveling, and all of a sudden I go by the pickleball courts, and I'm like, you might not have your equipment with you. But people, you sit there and watch, or you talk with people, and they're like, well, I've got a spare paddle. I mean, even
Right.
myself, I've got 2 spare paddles, like in my bag.
Of course you do.
And it's really about, like, if somebody comes by and they're interested in the
Right.
game, I don't want equipment to be, the reason why they can't try it. So, give them a paddle, bring them out on the court. Somebody did it for me, so
Yeah,
I do
that's
it
really
for
nice.
others. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I guess a final question. So as you look ahead, what excites you most about this next phase at RCG, and and what's to come for you, maybe personally, professionally?
Yeah, I think, as I look short term at the next phase of RCG, we're going into my first annual planning in another month with the company, and really diving down into a well-organized company with regards to clear goals, both short and long term, and having a 10-year plan as well, and kind of finding, like where you fit, and putting in the goals to kind of achieve those really long-term objectives, and building on the capacity and the strength of the team, and even we're small, so we're dividing up. Sometimes you're not large enough to have different departments for accountability. So there's opportunity here, just like at Community Land Trust, to wear some different hats, even though it might not be core to what your main job success and title reflects. But yeah, just looking forward to the next phase, and continuing RCG on its growth objectives, and some big redevelopment projects that we'll be planning as well, with some historic lands where I might be sitting right now.
Okay, wow, all right.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Tiffany.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for sharing. You're super articulate. You've got so much experience, so I think it's great for you to share this, and hopefully we can, a lot of people can listen in.
I enjoyed it, and thank you for affording me the opportunity to share my story.
Thank you for listening to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers podcast brought to you by Highview Partners, a talent search and recruitment firm focused exclusively on Canadian real estate. If your real estate team is looking to find the best next hire, or if you're ready to make the best next move in your career, then reach out to Highview Partners today. Follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at highviewpartners.ca.